Good afternoon again, everyone. Great to see you here on this beautiful, beautiful Sabbath day. My mom used to say, it's amazing what a little paint and flowers can do. When first being married, my husband and I rented a small house. It was painted odd colors and looked horrible. Thankfully, our landlady let us paint it in colors we suggested. Afterwards, we planted large flower beds in front of the house. We received so many compliments that summer. Everyone thought we spent a lot of money fixing up the house when actually we didn't. When telling my mother about this, her response was, "Isn't it amazing what some paint and some flowers can do?" My mom taught me that making small positive changes in my life can truly make all the difference in the world. That was sent to me by someone here in the congregation about their mother. This is Mother's Day weekend. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. Very special day that we are called on to honor our moms. Feels kind of weird for a man to give a Mother's Day sermon. We don't really know the complexities and the mind of a mother as a male, but I'm going to do my best by reading about things, giving you some tips maybe from the Bible that have expressed these areas of importance. You know, even if your mother is no longer living, you can honor her memory, and you should never forget what she's done for you in bringing you up. Without mothers in this world, it would be hard to imagine what kind of world we would live in. What would it be like? You know, my mother certainly taught me so many godly virtues throughout my childhood that have stayed with me even to this day. I can't imagine where I would be without her. She taught me to pray. I can hear her saying, "You better pray that comes out of the carpet." She instilled within me a sense of imagination. Don't do that again, or else. Or else what? What? She taught me how to anticipate. You just wait till your father comes home. She taught me how to count, at least to 3. 1, 2. She taught me repentance. Don't you ever do that again. And she taught me self-control. Now, when you're in the store, don't you touch anything. And then she'd often combine self-control with imagination, or else. You know, my mother taught me how to go to the bathroom. I'm very appreciative for that. I'm appreciative. I appreciate that I don't remember it. But eternally grateful, I should say, that she taught me this. Seriously, though, mothers teach us how to fit in with family and society, and the best ones show us how to have a relationship with God the Father and with Jesus Christ. I have a couple other real short stories here from people. I love my mom. She's kind, caring, hardworking, and she loves me and my brother. I'm so glad that while teaching me school, she has also helped teach me about God. Another one says, when we were grieving over Grandma's death, my mom was there to comfort us. I'm very grateful for that. Today I want to show you, brethren, the importance of motherhood and give you some biblical examples of great mothers, along with the godly characteristics that they bore. My title is Motherhood is the Pinnacle Vocation in Life. Now, Paul said Christianity is our vocation. I'm going to make the point here, though. If you don't have mothers, you don't have Christians. It's impossible. Motherhood is the pinnacle vocation in life. You know, when little girls grow up in today's world, parents or teachers or friends will often ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Meaning, what profession do you want to work in? It's a rare occasion when a little girl will say, I want to be a wife and a mother. You just don't hear that anymore. We've been so conditioned, or should I say, we so conditioned our little girls to believe that motherhood is somehow beneath them. And that if they want to do something important and meaningful in their lives, they have to get a job in the workforce. In other words, to be equal with men. Let's go out and do that so we can try to get up to that level of what we believe equality is. God says, however, that what is sitting at you or looking at you across from the table is important. That is important. God has given this walk of life of motherhood a special position of honor, higher than any other walk of life under it. He distinguishes mothers above all other persons on earth, and places them next to himself. I'd like to give you a couple of scriptures to make this point, to try and let this sink in, that he places mothers right next to him. Isaiah chapter 66, and I want to just read this. This is the second part of verse 12 into 13. He writes here, "You will be like a child that is nursed by its mother, carried in her arms and treated with love. I will comfort you in Jerusalem as a mother comforts her child. And when you see this happen, you will be glad. It will make you strong and healthy." Isaiah chapter 49, verses 15 and 16 says this, "So the Lord answers, can a woman forget her baby and not love the child she bore?" is the question. It's almost a ridiculous question that he asks here, though he does say, even if a mother should forget her child, if it were possible, I will never forget you, Jerusalem. I can never forget you. I have written your name on the palms of my hands. Again, God places mothers next to himself. Think about it. Is the vocation of a teacher higher than a parent? Why does the vocation of a teacher exist in the first place? To assist parents in educating their children. The vocation of teachers serves parents to educate. What about the vocation of a doctor? Well, what does a doctor do? He serves. He or she serves families. And the vocation of a doctor may pay more than parent, but it exists to serve families. What about important positions like governor or secretary of state, speaker of the House, or even president? Are they more important than a parent? Well, what is the purpose of government? It's to, as Paul says, to commend those who do good and to punish those who do evil. In other words, government exists to defend families, to protect families, to pass policies that enable mothers and fathers to be mothers and fathers to their children, to create a stable, nurturing society. Government exists to serve the vocation of a parent. There's no vocation higher than a parent, and even folks who aren't parents or who have raised children, raised their children, they're already gone, now you're in an empty nest. These people aren't somehow devalued. They have the great opportunity to help families through tangible works of service, whether it be with their kids or their grandkids or others in the community or friends. Different ways to reach out. It's not that the people who serve in the vocation of parent are somehow more important, right, than other people who don't. People are people. We're created equal. But what the Scripture teaches is that the vocation of a parent is more important than any vocation, and that the proper ordering of vocations places fatherhood and motherhood at the top. But we live in an upside-down world. Our world tells women, motherhood is a hindrance. Motherhood is a drag. Children are going to hold you back. If you want to do something important with your life, they say, if you want nice stuff, then you've got to limit those children. And so what does the world offer women? Well, deliverance. They look at it this way, from the burden of children. And it does this through this legal opportunity that was given to America by this ridiculous law of Roe v. Wade, where women can exercise their legal, as they call it, woman's right to choose fewer children, or not this child, or no children right away, or no children ever. And we hope that will all change in the next couple of months. But we need to hear the truth, and so do children themselves, brethren, that children are not an interruption in a parent's life work. They actually are a parent's life work. Every other vocation in which a parent might serve exists to serve the vocation of a parent. As important as other vocations are, and they are extremely important, we're not discounting that, God calls men and women to serve in a sundry, assortment of things. We can't mislead women and men into thinking that this vocation over here is more important than my calling as a parent, as a mother, as a father. This vocation over here means more to me than being a mother. Motherhood and fatherhood matter more than all of them. So God calls us to honor mothers. Concerning the fourth commandment of honoring your father and mother, honor includes not only love, but also deference and humility towards a majesty concealed within them. You see, majesty concealed within a mother is the seemingly hidden high calling of motherhood. The church itself is compared to a mother, but the world doesn't understand the majesty of motherhood, which is why they'll always say and continue to say, pursue this, go do this, chase after this, here's what really matters, rather than being a mother. That's why they keep pushing this unfamily planning. They think 1,000 different professions and positions and careers are more esteemed than motherhood. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that women should not work outside the home. What I'm saying is that the greatest vocation isn't found somewhere out there. It's found in the hungry eyes of an infant, the inquisitive stare of a child, the hopeful gaze of a youth, the confident stride of a teenager, and the independence of a young man or woman stepping beyond the bounds of home for the first time. Let me share another story with you that was sent in to me. My mom taught me to help others. I remembered noticing her willingness to jump in and volunteer often. She was a wonderfully comforting caretaker whenever I was sick too. I try to follow her example and offer help when I see a person in need. Motherhood Matters. This is what Joseph Mindinski wrote in his book, First Comes Love. The most important person on earth is a mother. She cannot claim the honor of having built Notre Dame Cathedral. She needs not. She has built something more magnificent than any cathedral, the tiny perfection of her baby's body. The angels have not been blessed with such a grace. They cannot share in God's creative miracle. Only a human mother can. Mothers are closer to God, the Creator, than any other creature. God joins forces with mothers in performing this act of creation. What on God's good earth is more glorious than this, to be a mother? And I consider this other quote from this great thinker and writer G.K. Chesterton. He said this in his book, What's Wrong with the World? How can it be a large career to tell other people's children about the rule of three, this is referring to a mathematical problem, and a small career to tell one's own child about the universe? How can it be broad to be the same thing to everyone and narrow to be everything to someone? No, a woman's function is laborious, but because it is gigantic, not because it is minute. I will pity Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones is a code for all mothers here. I will pity Mrs. Jones for the hugeness of her task. I will never pity her for its smallness. Consider the hats a woman mother wears. I've heard this before. All the different professions she fulfills. Chef, dietitian, nurse, philosopher, cosmologist, mathematician, physician, lawyer, judge, spiritual director, moral compass, teacher of discernment, aesthetics, manners, temperance, and modesty, life coach, personal manager, home manager, organizer, chauffeur, referee, head janitor, imager of the church, and example of faithfulness and respect to her husband. In short, a mother is a shaper of souls for time and for eternity. Her calling along with fatherhood is the greatest and highest vocation on earth. Here's another story. My mom and I argued at times, but I always knew she totally and deeply loved me. As an adult, I got really sick for a while, and my mom left her work and responsibilities at home and came to live with me for a short while, taking care of me until I was better. I went to stay with and help her later in life after she had a stroke, but that was of little measure next to all that she did for me. I'd like you to turn to Proverbs chapter 31. Proverbs chapter 31. We know that Proverbs 31 is known as the virtuous woman chapter. It is the high ideal to which women are called. It's a high ideal. Some women look at this and they feel overwhelmed by it. It's a standard. Doesn't mean you're going to match up perfectly to it. There are many things that men are called to do, and we can't match these things perfectly. But we'll read down further in the chapter here in a minute, but I want to bring to your attention first something that's very important in verse 1. The words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. Now, it says these are the words of King Lemuel, meaning belonging to God or consecrated to God or something of that nature. Now, I believe that this is King Solomon described in a title. Now, others don't believe that. But this was possibly given to him by his mother, sort of something that she adored him with. But what I want you to notice here is the second part of the verse. Is it says, these are the words that were given to him by his mother. Now, I believe that this whole chapter is something that was given to him. And if this was Solomon, then this was Bathsheba. And she related this instruction to him. He remembered it, and he put this down. If not in some memory form, he put it down in a way that he could remember some of these wise sayings that she gave him. So Solomon had great respect and honored his mother as every son should. I'd like you to look at 1 Kings chapter 2. You can hold your spot here in Proverbs 31. We're going to come back here. But in 1 Kings chapter 2 and verse 19, I want to show you the great respect and honor that Solomon had for his mother. 1 Kings chapter 2 and verse 19. I won't tell you the whole background here because I want you to just notice this one thing here. When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her. The king stood up to meet her. He bowed down to her, and he sat down on his throne, and he had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. The choicest place to sit was at the right hand of the king. And this is exactly where Solomon put Bathsheba, the queen mother, at his right hand. This is the respect that he had for her. Now back in Proverbs chapter 31, we see Solomon puts to papyrus what his mother had taught him. And he takes special care to write down the words, and he puts them in the book of wisdom in the last chapter as the crowning jewel of wise sayings. Notice what she tells him in verse 25. We'll read down through 31. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looks well to the ways of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up, call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but you excel them all. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. This is not written to women as much to men. This is instructions from Solomon's mother. These are wonderful characteristics, and I would like to focus in on what I might call 4 primary characteristics for the rest of my sermon, or qualities that mothers probably already have, but if they don't, you can develop them. Strength, honor, wisdom, and kindness. Those are the 4 attributes. Strength, honor, wisdom, and kindness. Notice in verse 25, strength is one of her pieces of clothing. She is the epitome of strength in the midst of frailty. Now, we're not talking about physical strength here. We know that women, as Paul says, they're the weaker vessel. This is what science tells us too. Matthew Poole says this in his commentary, not strength of body, which is no ornament of that sex, except only as she preserves her health and strength by sobriety and exercise, which other men waste by intemperance and idleness. But strength of mind, magnanimity, courage, resolution, activity. Let me first talk about strength. When we talk about strength, which is the first attribute, we are going to look at Jochebed. Let me read you a story that was sent in to me. My mom is very brave and strong woman. She's had many trials in this life, but she faced each challenge with courage, determination, and strength. I've never heard her complain or feel sorry for herself. I love and admire her and aspire to be more like her. Turn over to Exodus chapter 2, if you would. Let's look at this briefly of the story of Jochebed. This is a biblical mother that exhibited this quality as the mother of Moses. Exodus chapter 2 and verse 1, we start out here, and it says, a man of the house of Levi went and took a wife as a daughter of Levi. And we know from Exodus chapter 6 that this man was Amram, right? And his father's sister was Jochebed, so he married his aunt. And she bore him Aaron and Moses. And Amram lived for 137 years. So verse 2, he goes on to say here, Moses writes, so the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. And his sisters stood afar off to know what would be done to him. And then the Pharaoh of daughter came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked alongside the river. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. That's not what happened in the Ten Commandments. This is what happened. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And so she had compassion on him, even as she was not a mother, it seems, and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. And then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, she apparently came up to him, and she said, shall I go and call for a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And so the maiden went and called the child's mother. And then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. And so the woman took the child and nursed him, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him out of the water. Jochebed is mentioned in the faith chapter of Hebrews chapter 11. I don't know if it's by name, but she's mentioned there. But yet is often overlooked as one of the greatest mothers of the Bible. It took a tremendous amount of courage, of strength, to commit civil disobedience and risk her life by hiding her child. And that's what it was. It was a civil disobedience which she committed. You see, Pharaoh told the Hebrew midwives to kill all the newborn boys in Egypt of the Israelites. But they didn't, they said, because they feared God. And so since they didn't do it, Pharaoh told all of the Egyptians, all of his people, to throw the newborn boys in the river. But Jochebed's strength saved Moses so that he could be used for the purpose of bringing God's people out of Egypt. You see, this amazing story of a mother hiding her baby shows the courageous love that mothers have, and reminds us of all the courage it takes on a daily basis to make the best decisions for their children. You know, as children, we often don't see the scars, the hidden tears of our parents, of our mothers. We don't know their full story and the courage it took to prepare for a new life, to nurture and sacrifice for a new child. We don't see the effort they put in, the early mornings, the late nights, the times that we were at school. We often don't know what our mothers were doing to make our lives more meaningful and richer for us. You know, even as adults, we don't know all the things that our mothers did. And so all the more reason that we should take time to appreciate them, not just on one day of the year, but keeping in mind this every day of the year. Think about the late nights, and I remember when I was in 8th grade, we were doing a project on building foam houses in wood class. I think it was shop class. And I had procrastinated, and I'd finally got my house done, but the roof was quite detailed, and I had to break apart all these little tiny pieces to put wood shingles on it, and they all had to be glued down. And we had to do the whole roof. I mean, this whole hip roof is probably as big as this right here. And I remember staying up till 1 o'clock doing it, and my mom was helping me. And I was exhausted. I had to go to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, my mom had practically finished the whole thing. And she went to work the next day too. I think she was up till like 4 in the morning. She doing this for me. So, and then I had to get it to the Bartle Hall down in Kansas City to be judged on this. I ended up taking 5th place because my mother finished the project for me. That's what mothers do. Spoiler alert, mothers are not sitting on sofas eating bonbons all day long. They're not watching Bold and the Beautiful while you're at school. There's a couple other stories. My mom worked in a miserable, hot, sweaty shoe factory so that we could be provided for. She would stay up late at night to sew for me and my sisters after working all day in that unair-conditioned factory. One of my memories is of walking to the shoe factory after school or during my lunch break. I'd throw pebbles at the giant 2nd-story window till someone would notice and go get Mom. I'd ask for a quarter or 50 cents for spending, and she would wrap up some nickels and dimes in a piece of paper and toss them down to me. I think sometimes I really just wanted the reassurance of seeing her rather than the money. Another one writes here, my parents both, having been born in the early 20s, suffered through many trials. When I was young, I was oblivious to that. As I got older, I was too far self-absorbed to think about them and what they had gone through. I wish I had asked more questions so that I could have understood their struggles. I think I would have treasured them even more. Our second characteristic of mothers is, in verse 25, honor. Is honor. I'd like you to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 1. I want to use Hannah, the story of Hannah, for this particular characteristic. Here we have a mother who was honorable, I believe, before the Lord. We're told here of a man named Elkanah, and he had 2 wives. He had Hannah, and he had Peninnah, if I'm saying that right, Peninnah. So Peninnah had children, as we know the story went, and Hannah did not. And each year that Elkanah went up to the temple in Shiloh to make an offering, he would give a double portion for Hannah despite her being able to bear children because he loved her so much. But Peninnah would harass and provoke Hannah just to get a rise out of her, to make her miserable, it says, because she couldn't have any children. And this happened for several years that she dealt with this. And so from that point, we're going to break in the story in verse 8 of 1 Samuel chapter 1. It says, then Elkanah, in verse 8, her husband said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why don't you eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? I don't think my wife would like that if I said that. So Hannah arose after they had finished eating. Just gives you a picture of what goes on in a guy's head. Even back then, right? People are not different. Just a different time period. So Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, and now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, it says, and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. And then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on my affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget your maidservant, but you will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. And it happened in verse 12, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. And now Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk, and so Eli said to her, How long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. And Hannah answered, he said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. And then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked of him. And she said, Let your maidservant find favor in your sight. And so the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. And then they arose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came home to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, means he had sex with her, and the Lord remembered her. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked for him from the Lord. And now the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah didn't go up, for she said to her husband, Not until the child is weaned, and then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. Do you notice that it was Hannah who said, No, I'm not going to go up? It was Jochebed who said, I'm going to hide Moses. Women step up to the job. And the husband said, do whatever seems best to you. Wait until you have him weaned. Only let the Lord establish his word. And then the woman stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned him. I don't know how long that is. I don't know if that was 5. I don't know if that was 8. It seems he was a bit older because he was able to do a lot of things at the temple. Now, when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bowls, 1 ephah of flour, a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. And then they slaughtered a bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I have prayed. And the Lord has granted me my petition, which I have asked. Therefore I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord. And so they worshipped there. For this child I have prayed. This resonates with a lot of women, this story does. You see, Hannah was ridiculed by Peninnah, and she suffered through the hardship of her barrenness for what seemed to be years. You notice her response, it was twofold. It was a lesson in honor. First, she took her problem where? She took her problem to the Lord. She took her problem and her pain to the Lord. I think mothers are more apt to do this than fathers are. Fathers often feel like they can control the situation and tend to rely more on their own effort. But mothers see the limitations of this life, and Hannah saw that there was nothing that Elkanah could do for her. There was nothing. What could he do? He did what he could do. He gave her a double portion. He loved her, but there was nothing he could do to assuage the desire to be a mother. And so Hannah took her pain to God in prayer, in faith, and offered her own son in service even before she conceived. This was an incredible way to honor the Lord and her child. And secondly, once Samuel was born and ready to be dedicated to the temple, she followed through. She didn't renege on her promise. She followed through on what she said she was going to do, a noble thing to do. And so God accepted Hannah's request, and He used Samuel to eventually do great things in the service of the Lord for many years. And God blessed Hannah with more children. When you honor God, brethren, God will honor you. The prophet Samuel had a wonderful mother, and I'm sure he was very proud of her. The story of Hannah should help us appreciate all mothers who have dedicated their life to raising their children in the nurture of the Lord. There is no greater honorable thing to do than to point children back to their Creator. I'd like to read to you 2 more stories that were sent to me. One day I came home from school early because I skipped out on track practice, and my mom asked why I was home so early, and I said I quit. She told me, "You're not quitting. You're going to go back and finish what you started." I did, and it was one of the most profound, life-changing moments It taught me that even though things are rough at the moment, sustained hard work pays off in the end. Another story is when I was about 9 or 10 years old, my mom made me a sign with paint that said my first name and then I love you. At the time, my mom was very busy. She always seemed to have some place to go or something to do. And I may not have realized it at the time, but it was very special of her to make that for me. Although she didn't need to, she took the time to make that piece of art, which I still have today. Sometimes something small like that becomes something very special later. Number 3 is wisdom. Wisdom. Proverbs 31:26, the third quality that we see is to open her mouth with wisdom. When she speaks, her words are wise. I'd like you to turn to Ruth chapter 2 and look at the story here briefly to understand the characteristic of wisdom in mothers. In this book of Ruth, we have this fascinating story of Naomi leaving Israel with her husband and going to the land of Moab. And there we know that she had 2 sons, where they would both marry Moabite women. Well, sometime shortly thereafter, all the men in her life died. Her husband died, her 2 sons died. She was there as a stranger now with just her 2 daughters-in-law. And she decides that she will now return to her homeland in Israel. And one of her daughter-in-laws, if I'm saying that right, Ruth, says, you know what, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go back with you. Wherever you go, I'm going to go. And we know that they were poor, and Ruth, when they get back, has to go out and glean the fields. She has to go out and spend time gleaning for food now because they don't have anything. And it's here that we pick up the story in Ruth chapter 2 and verse 19. It says, her mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, where have you gleaned today, and where do you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you. And so she told her mother-in-law that with whom she had worked, and said, the man's name with whom I have worked today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. And Naomi said to her, this man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives. And so Ruth the Moabitess said, he also said to me, you shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest. Now I want you to notice the wisdom that is expressed from Naomi. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field. And so she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. And chapter 3 and verse 1, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, and that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, again, the words of wisdom, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourselves, anoint yourself, and put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. And then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you will go there, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you shall do. And Ruth said, all that you say, I will do. Now, how would Ruth know what to do? Naomi told her what she needed to do. She had the wisdom to tell her. You know, this is an often missed part of the book of Ruth, I think. Naomi has taken her on. Ruth has her own daughter now, and she's giving her words of wisdom that will transform not only her life, but the lives of so many people as a chain reaction of events that will culminate in the birth of the Savior of the world. Children have to understand that they don't know it all. That's implicit here. What would have happened if Ruth had disregarded Naomi's advice? What if she said, I ain't doing it. Not going to do it. Not going to happen. I'm going to go my own way. Now, am I saying that Christ wouldn't be born? No, I'm not saying that. God would make it work out. But the honor on Ruth, and that she is afforded in the Bible, would have been lost. It would have been gone. And it's hard to say what her life would have been like if she had not heeded the wise and shrewd advice of her mother-in-law, Naomi. You can reference Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, where it says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the teaching of your mother. Why? For they will be a graceful ornament around your head and a chain around your neck." You know, kind of lost in all of this is that an unwilling and unruly and unteachable child not only harms himself, but he brings shame upon his or her own mother. What kind of reputation would these mothers have if their children were rude brats and didn't listen to anything they said? No matter how hard the mothers worked, what kind of reputation would the mothers have if they had rebellious children? Let me show you. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 1, "A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother." Proverbs 15:20, "A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother." Proverbs 17:25, "A foolish son is a grief to his father and bitterness to her who bore him." Proverbs 29:15, "The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother." Children reflect on their parents. Naomi was a wise mother, and Ruth benefited from her instruction. Characteristic 4 is kindness. Kindness. This is the fourth quality of a mother in Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 26. She gives instructions with kindness. Let me tell you a couple other stories that were sent in to me. My mom would play I Spy with us. I remember always being happy when she initiated that game. She also often had little candies in her purse for us after work, and sometimes she would bring me a new coloring book. That always made my day. She also stood up for me many times, and I'm always grateful for my sweet mother. Another one wrote this: "When I was a preteen, early teen, I wanted to get a mini bike and eventually get into motorcycles. My mom absolutely refused to allow it. When I got into my mid-teens, with my dad's help, I started getting into guns. Once I had a few, and it was common for me to be cleaning guns in the living room while watching TV, she said that she wishes she would have let me get a motorcycle instead." Through all of that, she became more accepting and supportive of things that she didn't care for. I even got her to hold guns, and she even held some of my snakes and mice. The individual that portrays, I believe, the characteristic of kindness is the mother of Rufus. You may not have heard about the mother of Rufus, or you may have forgotten about her. I'd like you to look at this in Romans chapter 16 and verse 13. Paul writes here about the mother of Rufus, very briefly. Romans 16, verse 13, as Paul writes to the church at Rome, he says, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and also his mother, who has been a mother to me as well." Mother of Rufus is an obscure mother in the Bible, but no less important. It really is an interesting sentence that I think the Apostle Paul writes here. I wonder what your initial gut reaction is to this statement. What is it that you think of? Perhaps, you lost your mother when you were younger, and maybe another stepped in to fill that void in many ways and acted like a mother for you. Or maybe perhaps you moved to another city where you didn't have a mother around you any longer, and someone stepped in to fill that role in your life. If you did, then you know exactly what Paul means by this statement. If not, you still get the picture, because to me, when I think of a mother, there might be no better way to describe her than kindness. Men aren't kind. That's not what we're known for. I suppose that we can learn to be kind. I'm not telling us not to be kind. But for a mother, it just seems to come naturally. There's a characteristic of kindness that sort of oozes over their children. But it also extends to others as well. They just seem to know when a young man needs a motherly figure in their life and are glad to fill that role when needed. You know, I don't know what happened to Paul's mother. I have no idea. I don't think we know. There might be some tradition. I'm not sure. It's possible he may have been considered dead to his family once he converted to Christianity. Because, you know, as Paul tells us, he was a Hebrew of the Hebrews. He was a hardcore Jew, completely entrenched in Judaism. And maybe perhaps she died. Maybe, we don't know. But sometime after Paul's conversion in Acts chapter 9, in around, 36 AD or so, and this letter to the Romans some 20 years later that was written in Corinth, this woman had mothered Paul in some way, shape, or form. Now, where did this happen and under what circumstances? We don't know. It wasn't in Rome, it seems, because when the apostle penned this epistle to the saints in Rome, he hadn't yet visited there. We see that from Romans chapter 1. So can we speculate here? Let's speculate just a little bit on maybe what was going on. Difficult to tell, but did this spiritual mother have maybe a home somewhere along Paul's missionary journeys in Asia? Is that possible? Was there a special room? Maybe she left it for Paul himself. I don't know. Called Paul's room, where it was always ready for him every time he came through. And she would fix him a warm meal, and he'd be in a warm bed, and she would comfort him through his long, weary travels. Maybe she fixed him his favorite meal to her preacher's son that he enjoyed. Did she apply ointment to his bloody back after being shipwrecked and beaten and stoned and whipped? When his brow was furrowed with anxiety for the churches under his care, did she offer words of encouragement as a loving mother would do for a son? When even his own brothers in Christ treated Paul ill, did the apostle in the faith, his mother, remind him that there were many like her who loved him and appreciated his sacrifices for the master's sake? You know, surely some of these are distinct possibilities. It's hard to imagine. One thing that's not difficult to imagine, however, is the kindness that I believe she at some point had shown Paul, even as his own mother did. You know, I had somewhat of a surrogate mother, if I want to call it that, as I moved to the lake here many years ago. When I was a teenager, I moved out from my mother's house because there were some problems with my stepfather, and I moved in with my dad/grandmother. I actually lived with my grandmother, but I went to church with her. And my grandmother, in many ways, was a surrogate mother to me as well. She behaved as that. But I remember one particular family who kind of took me in under their wings, and that mother was somewhat of a mother to me as well. And it wasn't until I was older, to my shame, that I really appreciated what she had done. She isn't alive anymore, so it's difficult to express that appreciation for her kindness toward me. You know, women are like that. I might just mention Lois and Eunice, who were the grandmother and mother to the young evangelist Timothy. They were credited with installing the faith inside Timothy. Mothers are like that. My mother, I believe, gave me the greatest gift I could ever have. She brought me up in the truth. The greatest thing. Proverbs 31, let's conclude here and read down from verse 27. You know, mothers always dream to see their children become the best of who they are. Their patience in waiting for them to learn how to live and how to triumph in life is a banner of victory over this imperfect world. Motherhood is a need bound without time in the circle of life. Proverbs 31:27, she carefully watches everything in her household and suffers nothing from laziness. Her children stand and they bless her. Her husband praises her. There are many virtuous and capable women in the world, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. Reward her for all she has done, Bathsheba says to Solomon. Let her deeds publicly declare her praise. And so that, brethren, is the resplendent majesty concealed therein. There is no greater vocation on earth, for it is God's chosen means to bring children into this world, and likewise, through fathers and mothers, to lead children to the God of our fathers, to our Father, and to His Son, Jesus Christ. Happy Mother's Day.